Our first story today coming to us from the Bitcoinist, and the title of this is BIZ, which is the Bank of International Settlements, fears central banks may lose relevance to private cryptos. And I'd like to kind of read between the lines here because this is all about an event that is currently being held at Princeton. Shout out to all the Princeton alumni out there. The general manager of the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, and this is Agustin Carstens. You know something's funny when somebody has the last name Carstens, all right? Now, for those of you who have the last name Carstens, this is not a personal attack or derogatory smear upon you whatsoever. But his name's also Agustin. And that does not bode good things. Now, at this event going on at Preston, this gentleman is urging banks around the world to embrace digital money. Embrace it. Digital money, guys. Listen, we've been swindling everybody, all the people for the last several thousand years with this whole like king queen banking thing. I know we made the switch to the king and queen to the banking thing. That's a pretty smart move. I think David, you thought of that? Yep. David gets a Lambo this year, guys. Remember that? Maybe a Murcielago, David. You did a good job over there, David. But, this is just pretty interesting to me. Now, he is arguing that the current financial regime that we have across the world is undergoing a revolution. And we like revolutions around here. And banks, being part of the existing trustworthy establishment, should remain in control. Because, of course, if banks lose control and people actually had more liberty and freedom, there would be just like people might actually be happy. And like that would be awful. That would be terrible. I mean, the banks and governments have worked very, very hard, to make life overall miserable and financially inaccessible and attempt to just screw people at every turn. Like, we cannot be giving these people happiness and options like that. No. That would be an upset to the entire, the entire regime that we've built here. Now, in his speech, which was titled The Future of Money and the Payment System, What Role for Central Banks? I'm not going to lie. As a YouTuber, I don't think that would get a lot of SEO as a title. So maybe hire a different staff, Mr. Carstens. Moving on. Now, this gentleman makes a case for central banks to take control of digital assets so that specific standards can be established. Because remember, it's all about control, all about regulation. So according to this gentleman, central banks currently provide the necessary basis of trust to the system by ensuring security and liquidity. Because nobody has ever made money off an illiquid market. Furthermore, central banking carries the added responsibility of preserving their role at the center of global payment systems. They cannot permit themselves to fall back in their role of financial stewardship. I mean, they've worked really, really, really hard to put themselves as the ultimate middleman for all financial transactions. An unnecessary middleman, because, we've now developed through technology a way to just send value directly to somebody else without needing a financial intermediary. But they've worked hard to get to this role where you think that you need somebody that you can trust to send value to somebody else. Guess what? Turns out you don't need to trust anybody, and you can actually hold your own currency. But they've worked hard, gosh darn it. Now, for this gentleman, it is vital that central banks also take control of the narrative itself. Because if Rupert Murdoch has taught us anything, controlling the narrative is priceless. That banks need to control the narrative surrounding the emerging trends in digital asset or risk being left behind. Wouldn't that be terrible? He says we have a responsibility to be at the cutting edge of the debate. Well, you better take some tips from Ben Shapiro, because that boy is crushing it. There is really no choice but to do so, as otherwise events will overtake us, end quote from Mr. Carstens there. Now, despite this, Carstens insisted that the future is bright only if banks collaborate with the private sector so that they can spur technological innovation. And I'm pretty sure that by collaborate, he means control, regulate, extort, blackmail, take control of, steal their private property, and blackmail them into submission. Right. Quote, central bank public goods. I'm going to have to check my dictionary, but I'm pretty sure that's an oxymoron. Central bank public goods, definitely an oxymoron, right? Improve the functioning of the monetary system. They do this by giving the private sector greater scope to innovate for everyone's benefit. Central banks amplify the efforts of private sector innovators by giving them a solid base to build on. Here's the thing. I am not, for those of you who are watching this, of course, I am being somewhat comical in my news coverage today. Here's the reality. This is not to say that I do not understand or value the role that banks play in economics. That is where I approach the markets from. I've been involved in finance for a long time. The basis of any strong economy is stability, right? And this is, among other things, one of the reasons that the United States of America, for example, has risen to such a dominant role economically around the world. It didn't just happen overnight. There were some fundamental things here that many individuals who generally lean more toward the America is terrible and evil and awful. Again, that's you can argue or have your complaints about the way that things have become. But if we look at some fundamental reasons why America was able to gain its level of economic supremacy around the world, there's not a whole lot that separated it from other European countries or other nations at that point in time. Spain, Portugal, Great Britain at that period in time, Germany, all of these countries, and France, all of these countries had far larger colonial territories than America. And it was no sure thing that this young, small upstart that had just basically rebelled from the British Empire back in 1776, and a little bit obviously started before that, there would be anything but a small colony that had maintained its independence. As many colonies, even though America was the first colony of the British Empire to revolt and gain its independence, that it would go on to become what it became. There were some key fundamental things here. The founding fathers were extremely intelligent individuals, and they set the Constitution and they set the government structure of America up to be stable. And because of that, America, even though we had a civil war, we've never had a massive strife and turmoil over the change of leadership in the government, right? And that central level of stability creates and fosters a strong economy. Obviously, we've had our issues with banks. We went through one central bank and then two central banks, and then, kind of the Wild West of banks making their own currency. And now we have the Federal Reserve System, which, again, synonymously also accelerated America's absolute rise to economic hegemony over the United States. So we can have a conversation about whether that was morally good or ethically good or good for the entire world. But if we look at fundamental concepts like stability, we can see that a government that is very stable. So, for example, if we look at other countries, when they've had like monarchical systems or other type of systems or dictator systems or tyrannical systems or other forms where there is lots of strife and civil unrest, when a king or empire or leader or figurehead of the government dies and there's a large war for succession, all you need to do is look at France and Great Britain for a great example of that, or earlier elements in history. But of course, we can just go back to the 1800s and the 1900s of modern history to see those things happen in reality in modern times. That really, really, really hurts economies, hurts countries when the government especially seizes funds from business people, which they do in times of war. And then obviously the general populace is depressed economically and financially during times of war. So when you have a stable government, when you have a system that is stable from regime to regime, from regime to regime, excuse me, I meant president, but I repeat myself, same thing. Then that fosters a strong, good economy that just keeps the gears keep grinding regardless of what's going on in the government. Changes happen here and there, but overall business as usual, right? And that's what America has enjoyed basically since its inception. Even with things like the Civil War, again, that was not fought over the change of, one figurehead to the other. That was an internal strife, and generally, if people look back on modern history, the largest internal strife that America has had. Overall, it's been fairly stable economically and politically. I don't necessarily know why I got into that large tangent, but it's important to understand these things. So this individual is arguing that, I just wanted to state that I understand, again, and I just want to frame this in the fact that this dude's like not totally like a corrupt, evil, awful human being. He's just speaking a mindset and a philosophy that is going to be very different generally from that which is popular among those from my generation, or from the younger generation, or from a lot of you guys watching. This is where, so continuing on with this quote, he says, this is where central banks need to focus their efforts. Today's technological advances can certainly help to build a more efficient and more inclusive financial system, and central banks need to embrace that innovation. At the same time, their traditional functions are tailor-made for the many innovations on the horizon, including central bank digital currencies. Dun, 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 dun. Yes, he said the word. So this speech does contain a sense of urgency, in my opinion, kind of reading into this individual's statements. And that was certainly missing. That feeling of urgency was definitely missing when he spoke on, and I've heard other individuals, but this individual did speak on this topic just earlier this year. And when he spoke earlier this year about the topic of CBDCs, he did state that there's no urgent need for central banks to adopt sovereign digital currencies. We've got plenty of time. But remember, at that time, Libra had not yet published its white paper or even really been announced to the general public. So it could be said that largely bankers were caught off guard on the prospect of corporate coins challenging their existing system. And again, I've said this at length, guys. We are either going to see one of two things, but we're definitely going to see one of them. We're either going to see corporate coins like Libra, and then if we see Libra get approved, we're going to see a bunch of others toe the line and basically be co-opted by governments until governments can develop a good alternative of their own. And then we'll see regulation. We'll see things get banned or regulated into the ground until we have to accept the subpar sovereign digital currency. Or we're going to see, it depends on how fast central banks move. That's really what it is. If central banks move very, very quickly and they're like, move fast and break shit, let's go. Then what they'll do is they will not allow things like Libra to occur. They will shut that shit down. And they will just start promoting heavily this massive, pretty huge shift. In my opinion, the way that banks and governments tend to move, which is quite slowly, this would be fairly jarring because I expect that this would be implemented over the next 5 to 10 years. They would regulate the introduction of things like Libra, or maybe they would allow it, but they would neuter it so much with regulation that it wouldn't really be a threat. And then they will publish and promote and actively engage their citizens with these sovereign digital bank currencies, right? Sovereign central bank digital currencies. It just really depends on how fast they move, because if they don't move fast enough, then they'll be like, okay, yeah, corporate coins are cool, but we'll just co-opt the corporations that put them out, and basically again, in a sense, neuter them so that they're not a large threat to the bigger project that we have coming out. Or maybe they'll just co-opt them entirely, and maybe they'll feel more control, and maybe that'll be. There's a couple different ways, but we will definitely see corporate coins or CBDCs play a major role in our lives in 10 years from now. Remember this. Write it down. I'm telling you right now. 10 years from now, you're most likely not going to have a physical dollar in your hand unless you're a rebel. Power to the people. You're going to be doing most of all your transactions directly from your phone, and it's going to be with a CBDC or a corporate coin. Again, it depends on how fast central banks move with this technology. And this is happening right now. This is going to fundamentally change the way that our private economy works. This is going to fundamentally change the way we change things. You're going to see the government seize physical currency. It's going to happen. Right? I'm telling you right now, the government will seize physical currency. They will require you to turn in, under penalty of law, your physical currency, very similar to what they did with gold back in the 1930s. Now, what's interesting is that Agustin has been a vocal opponent. See, she sells seashells by the seashore. He's been a vocal opponent of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin in particular. In an interview last year, he said that, quote, cryptocurrency is not money. They cannot assume the functions of money for the simple reason of how they are created. And of course, this statement underscores this concept that in their minds, only a central authority should be permitted to issue and control money within the global economy, which again, we just have to understand, is not necessarily right or wrong. It is a philosophical concept, right? It is a social concept. It is a social experiment. All money is. It's a social experiment because it is a derivative of value. It is an artificial instrument that is created to transact value to replace the barter system, right? So we have to understand that money does not exist outside of the minds of men and women. It is a human construct. It is a philosophical construct. It is an artificial construct that we use to simplify our person-to-person transactions and to simplify our global economy. Now, overall, it's revolutionized the way that we do things. But this idea that money has to be done this way or money has to be done this way, that's philosophical argumentation, right? And we've seen that as society changes, especially as technology progresses, there's a couple schools of thought on this. One, that philosophy pushes technology, so that the prevailing philosophy or belief system of a society will influence what technology comes out of it. And then there's lots of other, I don't want to say there's only two. I'm not a binary human being, unless it comes to biological concepts. But over here in this realm, there's also the school of thought that I fall into, which is that no, it is technology that drives philosophy, right? It is the technological innovation that changes the way that we're able to do things. And then that changes people's minds. And now they have new thoughts. They have to restructure their belief system, restructure their projections, restructure their biases, restructure their philosophy. So I believe that technology and social progress drive philosophy, right? And philosophy is just an eternal quest toward, well, and I think, philosophical thought and critical thinking, but I repeat myself, should be the most fundamental concept taught to our children, because that is what really, in my opinion, makes the difference between successful individuals who are ethical and morally complete and feel a sense of purpose and strive for things and make the world a better place, and your typical, like 17-year-old Fortniter who does not really have a lot of value to present to the world because they just don't have a goal. They don't have a quest. They're not even interested in questing for a larger goal or an ethical goal. They don't even know what ethics is. I think ethics is something they might use. It's an app on your phone that you might use to open up your car if it get lost. But philosophy, as it's typically thought, like, socialism is right, or communism is right, or modern monetary theory is right, or anarchy is right. Well, these are all concepts that change and evolve over time as technology drives thought. Technology and social progress, technological progress drive thought and change society, change the way that we do things, right? And now that we have Bitcoin, which is the people's money, which is decentralized currency, which is the ability to transact value without a centralized authority, and solve the double spend problem and create digital scarcity, which was why we couldn't have digital scarcity, because of the double spend problem. That is going to fundamentally drive and push society and philosophy. So I don't like this idea, and this is just something that I advocate. Don't allow the way that we've thought about things for years to blind you to how the way we think about things will be in the future, because technology drives philosophy, not the other way around, in my opinion. Now, with that said, in other comments made to our new generation of financial innovators, Vitalik Buterin, Satoshi Nakamoto, Charlie Lee, shout out to my homies. Carstens says his message to young people was, stop trying to create money. Well, guess what, bro? Come at me, because we're doing this. I'm going to leave you guys in the dust. Let me know your guys' thoughts and comments. Obviously, I covered a lot there, and I'm controversial. But let me know what you guys think about what I said. Let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions. I'd love to engage with you guys in the comment section down below. If you're watching this in a Breaking Bitcoin Bits after the recording, and if you're live here and you have a question, I'll get to it in the QA section at the end. But please make your thoughts known in the live chat. Now,